Welcome to the Life of Hair. My name's James Atkinson. Thank you for joining me in this week's episode. Now, this week's episode is a salon belter, an easy to do, fast technique that requires quite a bit of technical skill, but not too much. Lots of clients will have never have had it or experienced it before, so it offers a nice bit of intrigue to those clients that you give it to, so they feel like they're getting something genuinely special, different and interesting. So what's not to like? It's a salon winner in my book, and one that you can charge plenty of money for too. And it is quick, because when we go back to work after this lockdown period, we are going to need some techniques up our sleeve that get things done nice and sharpish. And this is definitely one of those techniques for you to use. I don't know about you, having had 9 weeks off now, I know I'm not ready to retire. Nevertheless, I'm enjoying the time, but I would like to go back to work now, at least for a few days in a week. Anyway, I digress. There's two things I'd love to say just before I get on with this video. The first thing is thank you to everybody who has subscribed. I hit 20,000 subscribers this week, and an enormous thank you to everybody who comments, leaves those thumbs up every single week. It is really massively appreciated. You guys have really helped to grow the channel. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please go and do it now. It is really genuinely appreciated. And I also just wanted to say a massive thank you to all the new Patreons that have joined this week. Thank you to you guys. It is massively appreciated. And on Monday the 25th is our first Patreon live session, all about colour theory, taking away any brand dependencies you might have and getting to really understand colour from the ground up. So I'm super excited to be bringing that to you guys, and I very much look forward to bringing you loads more content on this channel in the weeks, months and years ahead. So have a wonderful week. Stay safe, stay sane, stay well, and don't forget, if you enjoy it, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and leave me a comment down below. It is super appreciated. Let me tell you about the prognosis here of this client's hair. She's got a very warm root area going into a slightly lighter but still warm end colour. This is not what the client was after last time she had her hair done, but with a root stretch technique that was applied to her hair, she ended up with that colour. She was not satisfied, and she came to me to fix it. Now, she had been told by another salon that it wasn't possible to get her hair away from that colour in one session, and I, to a degree, agreed with them. However, I felt like I had a technique in the bag that I could use to really get her hair 90% of the way to where she wanted it to be in one session, and that is the technique that you see in front of you now. This is a freehand highlighting technique, something that I've covered in the past, but wanted to show you all the different scenarios where you can use these techniques. In this particular instance, I'm using it slightly differently as well. I'm taking a 5mm section and I'm weaving in the hair all the way through, up and down, up and down, up and down, taking effectively 5mm deep little triangle sections of a fairly chunky weave, probably double the size of a regular stitch, but not as big as a skip slice, or a ribbon weave as some people would call it. Working the way up the head like this is ensuring that I'm hitting more than 50% of the hair, generally speaking, and this will definitely impact the colour massively as we work up the head. Now, with these techniques, there's two things to really bear in mind. The first thing is the control of saturation. When you're controlling the saturation, you are making sure that you have not got too much product on your brush or on your board. And each time you take a section, you clean the tip of your board so that there is no product pressed against the scalp. Working cleanly when you are not working with foils is ultra important, and going back and making sure the underside of each section that you are scraping the product off the underneath so that the product will not be pressed onto the hair below. This is ultra important, guys, and something that I advocate that you spend most of your time on with this technique. The amount of product that you get on the top of the hair wants to be thick enough that you can't really see the section through it, but equally not enough that you're leaving blobs of colour that when you then place your next section on top, you may end up with pressing or blobbing or any of those terms that you might use to describe bleach leaking onto hair around it. I will note that the product that I'm using in this particular technique is not specifically a balayage bleach. It is Redken Powerlift with 20 volume mixed on a 1 to 1.5 ratio. That is to ensure the product is a little bit thicker and giving me even consistent product to apply, knowing that the product is a little bit thicker ensures that it's not going to travel as much as a product that might be mixed on a 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 ratio. Even worse, not measuring out your product at all. I have come across many hairstylists who just free pour and mix to the consistency that they like. But this consistency is inconsistent. It is really important, guys, that you use scales to measure out your product so that you can be assured of your results. The manufacturer's guidelines and recommendations all come in weights and measures. This is because the product is optimum performance when you are mixing the product in the correct ratio. The way that we get products to work outside of the manufacturer's guidelines, for instance, is only by following the manufacturer's guidelines first of all and truly understanding how that product behaves and should be used. I'm going to slow down a little bit here on the crown area, because the crown area is one of those areas where lots of people leave me comments saying, I wish you'd have showed the crown area a little bit more detail. Well, here you go. I do it exactly the same as I did the back. I'm going to work horizontally up the head using exactly the same technique. There's going to be one change, however, which I will come to in just a second. We're still using 5mm depth sections and we're weaving all the way through that section, controlling the saturation as we have done all the way through. But as we get higher up the head, more towards the crown area, we are going to ensure that we use a slightly finer weave. We're still going to dig deep into the hair, and I would probably say that this weave is more on the regular stitch side, but with the addition of digging down into the section. You wouldn't necessarily want to do this with a foil because it would leave a shadow at the root. But because we have got the root area exposed, we can use these vertical and horizontal brush strokes to blend away the root area beautifully. This is the bonus of doing a technique like this. Now, we are going to combine two techniques in this one look here. And this is because the client wanted to feel a little bit brighter around the face. She was ultimately used to being quite blonde, but didn't want the maintenance of being a blonde anymore, hence the original root stretching technique. In this particular instance, we are going to utilize a baby lighting face frame technique to ensure that our client feels a little bit of pop of blonde around her face. We're still going to keep the hair behind this area slightly darker than she has used to being coloured, but the point of the technique originally, having the root stretch, was that she didn't want the maintenance of being blonde anymore. So we get best of both worlds in this particular instance, and I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that blondes like being blonde. Blonde is one of those colours that I call the crack cocaine of hairdressing. It is completely addictive. So many clients that I have encountered in my career that have been blonde will forever be blonde. There's something about it for them. It's something that enhances their mood and their personalities. And I'm very dubious to turn anyone from blonde to dark. Don't get me wrong, I still do it, but I'm always dubious. Baby lighting as well around the hairline like this, when there is some grey present, as you saw in the sections, is a great way of diffusing the regrowth around the face as well. But what I would say is you need to be aware that obviously in the instance of this client, that this top section is much darker than those two side panels. So I'm going to slice this very first section right on the hairline. And that is very important when you've got dark hair and you're doing a face framing technique, that you leave out no hair on the very first section, because you will create a dark shadow right on that front section if you do. You can then subsequently weave the sections behind that, but that very first section I feel is very important that you take a slice along that front hairline. Combining techniques like this as well gives great intrigue to the client, because they really feel like they're getting a bespoke custom colour to their personal needs. Well, and of course they actually are getting that as well. We're going to go straight back into exactly the same technique that we used previously. Horizontal sections, saturating the hair throughout, making sure that there's not too much saturation on the underneath side of each section, and making sure that our sections are deep enough into the hair to ensure that we have enough hair density to prevent any pressing on the hair beneath. These techniques are so useful in the salon because they are great money earners. They are easy, quick, effective, and best of all, consistent. They take half the amount of time as this would take to do in highlights. I charge exactly the same amount as I would as if I was doing highlights, because at the end of the day, there's still an enormous amount of skill in these techniques. Controlling that saturation is not something that they could do themselves or that everybody's got in their toolkit. And it is not that difficult to learn, but when you've got it there, you have a unique proposition to that client. As I said in the beginning, this client had been to another salon and they had said to her that they couldn't get her hair light enough in one go without creating excess damage because of the lightness that was underneath. The beauty of a freehand technique is that it's a lot gentler on the hair, and when the product dries out, its effectiveness is reduced. And that also reduces the amount of damage because the ammonia burns off as the hair oxidizes. And when the ammonia is burnt off, the product is then less effective and less damaging. Still damaging, but less so. Remember, as you work up past the parietal ridge, the sections will become a little bit finer and a little bit more detailed to ensure that these top sections create a beautiful, seamless blend from the root area down to the colour underneath. I think these sort of techniques are going to be absolutely invaluable when we go back to work after this quarantine period, because we are going to deal with lots of ultra long regrowths. And this is a prime time to get your clients into something new as well. Those clients that have been having bleach highlights forever and ever and have their hair super blonde, but you know it's not doing the condition any good. Or they've then grown their hair down because of the situation, and you give them the opportunity to offer them something completely new. A slightly softer root area going into something blonde on the ends. In a nutshell, you could charge pretty much exactly the same as you did before, but reduce your workload somewhat because you don't have to put in millions and millions of foils to achieve these looks, but the client still gets something unique and interesting and completely different. They're not necessarily remembering what they had before to the exact degree. They're just looking to be blonde. So don't get caught in the trap of just going back to exactly what you were doing before with every single client. Utilize different techniques to give them new options when you go back to work. You will thank yourself in the long run. In a little bit more detail about how to deal with the partings. I always colour to the natural parting, and I know some of your clients will wear it on the side and in the middle. And what I would say is, if they wear it in the middle and on the side, I would colour to the middle. What you want to do though is wherever the two sides meet is ensure that you get a ultra fine slither of hair in between those two sections. Using those vertical brush strokes at the roots there is super helpful, by the way, guys. If you look at your root area and you feel the saturation is too high, then just use that vertical brush stroke to diffuse that root area. Can you see that micro fine slice of hair that I just placed over the opposite side? That is only how thick it needs to be, but it's enough to diffuse these two sections and stop them looking like one big section when you come to rinse off the colour. And that is the end of this technique, a super quick, easy, salon friendly technique, one that I absolutely love and use all the time. Allowed to process for the manufacturer's recommended guidelines and tone to your desired shade. In this particular instance, I've used Redken Shades EQ 9N with a tiny bit of 09V in it. I didn't want to completely flatten the colour out because there was still going to be some warmth left in it. I'm going to repeat this technique exactly as I have today next time I see this client. And by then I will have removed all of the warmth from her hair at that root area. And that will give me a beautiful, consistent colour that is not hugely blonde, but will definitely be much more easygoing for the client to wear. And there is that money piece around the face, a beautiful accent of very clean blonde. So the client is looking at that pop of colour rather than the darker blonde behind. She gets best of both worlds with this technique. Low maintenance, but feels quite bright and blonde also. I hope you've enjoyed this technique, and if you have, then don't forget, hit that thumbs up button, smash the subscribe button if you haven't already. It is massively appreciated on my behalf, and I will see you again for another episode of The Life of Hair next week.